So, we are still in the season of Lent. Woo! Right?
What?
Woo! Lent. It's not just from your dryer. Right? Other bad sermon titles. So, for our season of Lent, if this is your first time back since Lent started, or if you haven't been following along this whole time, we are exploring doubts. And so this week we're exploring the doubt of, what if I'm not spiritual enough, right? Do you ever feel like you're not spiritual enough? Right? You never feel like that? You're just like always like, I am the Zen master. Okay. It's true. Thomas, there we go. So, like, if you ever feel like you're not spiritual enough, this is for you. If you're comfortable in mediocrity, you can sit in this too, and you'll love the benediction, right? So, like, there's these people out there. There's all these other people out there that seem like they've tapped into something you can't, right? Like, if you look at Instagram, or if you look at Facebook, there's all these like people out there that are like super spiritual, right? I've never met Rob Bell, but I feel like sitting down and having lunch with Rob Bell would be kind of hard, right? Because he just seems so spiritual. I'd be like, God, geez, man. Like, you're like super happy now, and like you go surfing all the time. But it's hard to like look at these super spiritual people and not to feel like there's something missing in your life. I grew up with kind of that feeling. And if we're honest, it's hard not to feel that way all the time. It's hard not to think about ourselves not being spiritual. And there's a $42 trillion a year industry designed to make us feel that way, right? There's a spirituality and wellness industry that's not 42 trillion. Sorry, that's ridiculous. 4.2 trillion. 42 trillion would be like what we spend on bombs in this country, right? So it'd be like come to this weekend getaway and find God, or go to this church retreat and tap into your spirit person. Anybody remember that trend? When people be like, you want to tap into your spirit man? Right? No? Okay, cool. All right. Only the mainliners came this morning. They're like, we didn't do that. Complete these 5 steps to become a certified spirit guide or spirit coach or like something like that, right? I remember when I was in seminary in Pennsylvania, you could go to a weekend retreat and then call yourself a spiritual counselor. You can't do that in North Carolina, you'll go to jail. But which is a great thing, yeah. That weekend retreat, whew, that was an interesting thing. I did not pick up my certificate at the end of it. But I mean, I love learning and reading and exploring new things. I love to like find out about new stuff. Like if you tell me about a new spiritual trend or like something people are doing, I'm super into it. I want to know about it, right? But there's this whole industry designed to say like, hey, you know what? You got to figure these things out or you're not spiritual enough, right? How many of you know your Enneagram score? Right? Enneagram, right? Yeah, it's okay. You don't need it. Yeah, but your Enneagram score is a cool thing, but if you have to pay like some person $800 to interpret it for you, I don't know. I'm an exaggerator, right? I'm from the South, right? We do big stories. The fish was like this big, right? But if you have to pay somebody a lot of money to interpret something for you, if you have to do all these things or jump through these hoops in order to feel more spiritual or more spiritually connected with yourself, sometimes it can leave you feeling really like you're not able to connect to any of that on your own, right? You have to pay somebody or go to somebody to do that. And it really feels like too much when you don't have money to pay for all these wellness retreats, self-help books, these spirit guides, these coaches, these gurus to assist you becoming more spiritual, right? Like, yoga's great unless you can't afford yoga, right? Sometimes you're broke. We've all been there. And a lot of times, and this you know, sometimes I can be a little cynical. I'm trying to like put that guy on the shelf for a minute. But a lot of times when I see these things that everybody's into, it feels like the televangelist just found a new, cooler gig, right? With better clothes and better incense and better like whatever going on, right? Because, I don't always have a lot of money, and I want to go to some of these things, but it's like hard to get there, right? And it can be hard to navigate what is helpful and what's just more noise in our already loud brain full of doubts, right? Like sometimes these new things are helpful, and I don't want to ever dog on any of that, right? Sometimes these connections to these wellness groups and all that are helpful, but sometimes it's a whole lot of noise going on in your brain that doesn't need to be there because your brain's already noisy with everything else, right? Anybody else like that? You try to go to sleep and there's just all of these doubts coming into your mind. Like my favorite is, it doesn't matter what night it is, and now we have this new house that has like 3 doors that need to be locked. We just used to have 1, right? Every night we can lay in bed and Jess will go, "Did you lock the doors?" It doesn't matter if like we both watched each other lock the doors, right? That doubt creeps up in there, right? So there's already all this noise going on in your head, and maybe like sometimes we're just adding some more noise. Like you didn't used to know you needed your Enneagram score, but now you do, right? Like it's the same thing with Myers-Briggs or whatever the trend is, right? You didn't used to know that you needed to like do all these other things in your life. And it's cool if those things are helping you and they're coming back in, but if they leave you feeling like you're missing something, then that stinks. Like that happened to me all the time growing up in the church, right? Maybe that's why I see this way, is I grew up as a fundamentalist. But I would be told by pastors or youth pastors that I needed to pay for this course or that course in order to get really close to God, right? You're close to God, but you can be that much closer to God. That's a weird thing to say to a kid, right? You're close to God, but you can be that much more close. Like, it's like selling a timeshare, right? You could have 1 weekend in Orlando, but what if you had 6, right? I'd have to go to these classes, and my parents would pay for these classes, and would be told by people all the time, like, this is going to get you closer to God, this is going to make you more of a spiritual leader. And then I got to college, and I'd have all these friends say, like, you're just not really a spiritual leader. And I'm like, well, you made me buy the beer, right? Like, I was going to study, but you said, hey, let's go get some beer, right? How am I not the spiritual leader? I guess I have my hang-ups with a lot of what I see from the New Age wellness movement, and it feels just so much like the evangelicalism of my past. Like, it's not a bad thing. Like, evangelicalism isn't a bad thing until it's used to exclude people, right? New Age wellness stuff isn't a bad thing until it's used to exclude people, until it's like, hey, if you can't meet this price tag or if you don't fit into our model, then like, see you later. And this message, no matter how coded or disguised it is, maybe this, right? This is what really gets to me. There's always this message with stuff like this that says that you're broken, right? You're broken. There's something inside of you that's broken, and there's something you need to fix that brokenness, right? That's the message I always grew up with. You're broken. You're a sinner. Nothing's ever going to change you. Everything you do is bad. Like, you just need God, and God's so great because you're so terrible that nothing else can ever be good unless you just turn to God. And then even when you do, you're still bad, so it's just God, right? You're broken. You need us to fix you. You need to be at church to fix you. I mean, that's a good tactic, right? It's a good tactic to tell everybody that you have a problem, right? The only way to fix that problem is this product. And if you don't buy this product, the problem will never go away, right? It works. It builds stadium-sized churches. It'll get you on Oprah's book list. It will, but you see, like, the deep down message in there is a lie to me, right? It's a lie. Because Missiongathering, I want you to hear me when I say this. You're not broken, right? You're not a broken person. There's nothing wrong with you. You may be in different stages and places and journeys in your life, but you're not broken, right? Our connection to God is about reconnecting with the thing that we come from. It's not so much about fixing our brokenness. You see, we get lied to all the time. Told that when we're going through doubts or struggles that there's something wrong with us. But I'm saying right now that anybody that tells you that because you're going through doubts and struggles that there's something wrong with you is a devil. And the devil's a what? Devil is a liar, right? I don't mean like devil like pointy horns, like mythical figure, right? I mean like they're being one of those tempters. They're being one of those lie spreaders towards you. You're not broken because you're a part of God's creation. And God said, what about God's creation? God said it was good, so you are good. And yes, there are times of strife and turmoil. Yes, there are valleys, deep down valleys where it just doesn't seem like anything's going to be good. And there are mountaintop experiences. And yes, there are ways to improve our lives and see things more clearly. And there's times where we're doing things we absolutely shouldn't be doing, right? That would be naive not to think that. But that road to more spiritual fulfillment and peace is only made by walking it, and only made by walking it with God, right? Not as a broken person, but as somebody who is co-laboring with Christ. So being honest and real enough to decide to follow Christ is why we're here, right? And so before we dive into today's Bible verse, let's pray, right? Dear God, thank you for making us, right? God, thank you for creating us in this unique and amazing way that is only us. And God, we're glad that you've made us and called us good. We're glad that deep down inside we know that connecting to you isn't about there being some flaw in us, but there being such an amazingness in you. So God, this morning, may we connect with you. May we struggle with the doubt of, am I spiritual enough? Am I connected to God enough? Am I good enough? May we walk through that and see that we truly are right where where you want us to be when we're struggling the most. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen. So in Matthew's gospel, Jesus gives this big lecture, right? We talked about the one in Luke where it's on the plain. In Matthew's gospel, it's on the mount, right? The mountain. So Jesus gives this big lecture on like how to be a part of the kingdom. And we say kingdom because kingdom is gender specific. And we want to talk more about being a family and not an empire, right? It was, there was I can't remember her name right now, female Latinx theology professor who came up with that as to be in a more inclusive terminology, right? So that's why we say kingdom. It's not that I can't spell or that I have some sort of speech impediment with that, but I just thought we should talk about that for a second. But it's called the Sermon on the Mount, and we know there's a section in the Sermon on the Mount called the Beatitudes, right? And that's an old Latin word that means supreme blessedness, right? Because we got to make things complicated. And Jesus is telling the listeners who it is that is blessed to be a part of this new kingdom. And this list has been translated to the point where it loses some of its power, right? We've talked about that. How when we translate words from Greek into English, a lot of times we lose a lot of things from those words, right? Because sometimes we have more words for something in English, not very often. Sometimes we have less words for something in English, so it gets translated in what makes sense in our language, but we lose some of the power there. And so we don't have enough time to go through the whole list today because you all have lunch plans, right? And we don't want to be here until 1:30, right, Tim? No lunch plans, all right. So we don't have enough time to go through the whole list, but our focus today is on the first people that Jesus says are blessed, these first people that are the ideal members of the kingdom, right? So Matthew 5, verse 3, and we're going to do the NRSV here. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor in spirit, who the heck is that, right? Like that's an odd phrase. That's not a phrase you hear all the time. That's a phrase you may have heard before in church, but maybe not always understood what it is. The Greek here is actually makarios ho potokos ho pneuma, right? Super smart guy, right? So potokos, or patakos, right, is a word for poor. And we've talked about that word for poor before, right? It doesn't just mean monetarily poor. Now, if you remember, we've seen that word, and it means not just poverty, but it comes from a Greek root word that means forcing someone to hunch over or crawl, right? It's a violent word. It's a violent word because it's not someone who's just poor, it's someone who's forced to be poor. So one of the words we might use more is marginalized, right? Where a system of power has created a problem to where this person has to bend and scrape to something else. So it evokes an idea for the New Testament reader, right? Like when Matthew's writing, it evokes this idea of having to carry heavy burdens, right? Like you're like a pack animal that's been weighed down too much. And the word right after it kind of modifies it though, right? Because we're not just talking about people who've been marginalized economically or politically, because of the word that comes right after it, which is pneuma, right? You probably know that one a little bit more. That's more of a common word to come up in church Bible studies. But it's the word that's used for Holy Spirit, right? Or it's the word that's used for Spirit in the New Testament. It's a Greek word that means breath, spirit, wind, breeze, right? My mentor in college would call me cool breeze, right? Or whistle bridges. It was back and forth. I don't know which one was better or worse. But in the New Testament, this word, outside of the New Testament, this word would only mean like wind or a breeze, right? Like, or your breath. But in the New Testament, it's a substitute for a Hebrew word or a Hebrew concept, the word ruach, right? And if you've ever done a study on Genesis, right, ruach is that divine breath, that thing that gives life force to the nephesh, the soul, right? So the ruach is here, and in Hebrew, it's the spirit, the life force, the thing that makes the person who they are, right? We might call that a soul in modern times. Have you ever been with someone when they died? Not to bring it down a little bit, but when that last breath goes out, there's an absence, right? There's a void. And so that would be what the ruach is, the spirit, right? This idea, this thing that leaves. The thing that makes you, more than just, blood and flesh, makes you who you are. So, we have here, blessed are those whose souls have been made to cower or bend over against their will, right? If we were trying to do a more literal translation here, the Andrew Shipley literal translation, right? Blessed are those whose souls have been made to cower or bend over against their will. And I think it could be that Jesus is saying that blessed are those who have been made to feel inadequate by religion, right? Blessed are those whose religions have heaped heavy burdens upon them and who still seek and still keep going forward and still keep going after the truth. Blessed are those who have been cast aside for whom they love. Amen. Blessed are those who've been cast aside for where they came from, for not having the right look, for not having the right marriage, for not having the right whatever. I think that it fits Jesus, especially the Jesus I know, that this is what he means by blessed are the poor in spirit, because of another story that Jesus tells in a different gospel, right? About two men who go up to the temple to pray. Luke chapter 18, verses 10 through 14. Two people went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed about himself with these words: God, I thank you that I am not like everyone else. Crooks, evildoers, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of everything I receive. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He wouldn't even lift his eyes and look towards heaven. Rather, he struck his chest and said, God, show mercy to me, a sinner. And I tell you, this person went down to his home justified rather than the Pharisee. For all who lift themselves up will be brought low, and those who make themselves low will be lifted up. You see, Jesus is coming to make a world turned upside down. Jesus is calling us to a world turned upside down. And you see the people who say they have no doubts about who they are or who God is, right? They're not the ones who Jesus is calling to build this kingdom, right? Because they use their supposed knowledge and their pompousness, they use that to put others down and to heap heavy burdens on them in order to feel like the truly spiritual ones, right? There's going to be a lot of people that want to throw Bible verses at you, that want to throw all of this theology and all of these old dead white guys like quotes at you, right? All these European dudes that argued about whether God just sends everybody to hell, right? They're going to try to heap these heavy burdens on you, Mission Gathering, so that they can feel like they're the truly spiritual ones out there, so that they can feel like they have a corner on God's truth, that they have all of the market to themselves. Sorry. That prayer of the Pharisees seems so over the top, but you've heard people pray those prayers, right? I've heard people pray those prayers, right? I've been in church services where I've heard people pray, "Thank God I'm an American," right? I've heard people pray prayers that say, "God, we thank you that here we affirm traditional gender roles and family values," right? I've heard prayers where people just heap thing after thing after thing upon other people. You ever been with people that do those prayers? Where their prayers are like throwing shade at you, right? I was a youth pastor. I was a middle school youth pastor, and the head youth pastor, it was at Manly Baptist. Kid you not, that's the name of the church, right? Manly Baptist Church in Morristown, Tennessee. If you're watching, how's it going? And the youth group kids had bought me I had a mohawk, I had a green mohawk. It was a weird place. One of the deacons tried to get me saved every Sunday. I was like, "You voted for me to work here. I'm a paid employee." Like, I don't understand. But sure, like let's meet Jesus again for the 20th time. But the youth group kids, the middle school youth group kids, they bought me a present. They bought me a Green Day shirt, right? And I'm a punk rocker, so Green Day is like, but it was cute, so I wore the shirt, right? I wore the shirt, and then the middle school youth pastor, or the head youth pastor, the high school youth pastor comes into the middle school stuff, and I'm there just chilling. I respected this guy, I like this guy, and he gets up. I'm in the shirt the kids had bought me, right? I'm in this Green Day shirt. He gets up, and he goes, "This American Idiot album by Green Day is a lie from the pits of hell. And anybody who likes it is leading you down a path to hell." And I was just like, dude. And his whole prayer was like, "Thank you, God, that we can pick music that's not terrible for us." I was just like, yeah. I was just like, I felt convicted. I tore the shirt off and just ran around without a shirt. No, I felt so betrayed. And so if the Pharisees' prayer seems over the top, it's not, right? We've had those people in our lives. We've had those religious people that say, "Thank God I'm not a this or a that." How many of our journeys here at Mission Gathering began with someone looking at us or looking at someone we loved saying, "Thank God I'm not like those people," right? How many of us felt that and said, "Screw church, let's go"? I know I've seen it, I know I've lived it, but if we're honest with ourselves, and this is the hard part of being who we are at Mission Gathering, if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we're the Pharisees too, right? Sometimes it's us praying that prayer. We got convicted of that right after the election because it seemed like we were praying, "Thank God I'm not a Donald Trump supporter," right? I mean, if that's how you feel, like you're not welcome here, right? But it was hard. It was hard for us to say, you know what? We're limiting ourselves and we're limiting the people that can come to us, even though it was something we deeply felt. If we're honest of ourselves, we're guilty of being the Pharisees. But Jesus is telling the story to give us a way of not being that, right? Jesus wants us to know that all of the posturing and the posing and primping, it's all fake. It's all window dressing to cover up how insecure these people really are in their own spiritual journey. You know what kind of spiritual people are infectious, right? The ones who are secure in their journey. The ones who are like, "You know what, I'm on this journey and you want to come along with me? Awesome." The ones that are really insecure, they try to sell it really hard, right? They try to sell it super hard. I've watched I've done chaplain work and watched some people that are coming in to become chaplains really try to pray everyone into heaven. And I'm like, "Are you just worried you're not going?" And they don't like that because they're from a religion that's like, "No, I've signed the papers," right? Um, but the things that we're insecure about is something we can build up in ourselves and project at others, right? And so it's just window dressing, covering up the lacking in their own spiritual journey. And I've watched this happen to a lot of people in my generation, right? Like millennials, I know I talk about millennials a lot, and that's because, we're the largest generation for a moment of adults. There's a huge one coming up behind us. But I've watched a lot leave the shackles of fundamentalism only to seek like concrete affirmation in whatever passing trend has been featured on their favorite podcast or in the books that they want to read or just, seeing it on a news article. I've watched people who they get free and then they shackle themselves to something else. Like, this is going to be the answer that solves everything. This is going to be the thing that fixes me. Right? Because they're still living in that idea that you're broken and that there's something that needs to be fixed. Instead of you're on a journey and there's things to be experienced and learned along the way. Jesus is saying, blessed are the poor in spirit because they're truly free to follow him. Because they've been pushed aside and pushed out and cast aside by the religious groups that are all about themselves. They're able to follow Jesus because they can honestly say, I don't know what the heck's going on all the time. I don't know if I'm good. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know where I'm at, but I'll follow you. Right? Because when we empty ourselves of that ego, of that false cockiness, we're able to follow Christ more closely. The poor in spirit aren't burdened by false cockiness, right? They're not walking around being like, I got it all solved. Right? You just follow me down this path and we got it, we're golden. Right? But don't bring those other people. Right? No, the poor in spirit don't have false cockiness. They know that it's not about how good they are. They know it's not about how much they know. Right? They know it's not about how many forms they filled out. They know it's not about how many special prayers they prayed. It's about a choice in every passing moment to say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to take this next step in faith forward down this path called life. The poor in spirit, they may not know how this is going to work out. They may not always even believe that God's there listening to them, right? It's okay to have doubts. It's okay to be like, sometimes you're like, God, are you even there? Right? You ever been that broken up about something? That's a good and honest place to be. God can take it, right? Your journey can take it. Each and every week, I have to say these same things to myself, right? I have to tell myself, okay, God, I don't know how this is going to work or what's going to happen, but I'm here to follow your lead, right? There's a lot of weeks here at Missiongathering where I don't know how the heck any of this is going to work out, right? Or am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? But when you take the time to listen and follow God's lead, you may not get all of the answers. And a lot of times you're not going to get every answer you want, but you're going to get some sort of answer. You're going to get some sort of honest answer. And none of us have all the answers. I don't have all the answers for you, but that's what following God's about. Is that we don't have to have all those answers. We don't have to think we're the ones with everything, all of the knowledge, right? And I went to school to have all the answers. I have professors that still think they have all the answers, right? But none of us have that, especially not me. And I know that when I empty myself of my own self-importance, that I find myself being in a more honest place where I can both worship God and serve others. Because if I think it's all about me, if you think it's all about you, then you wind up in a place where the whole of the universe is just you circling around yourself. And what a depressing place that is, right? I don't want it to be all up to me. I don't want it to be all me. And I find that when I empty myself of who I am in my own projected mind, right? Do you guys remember those Facebook things where it's like who my mom thinks I am, who my friends think I am? When you empty yourself of all that, I find that God shows up with what I'm supposed to do next and who I'm supposed to be next. right? Because in that emptiness, I find, like we talked about last week, that still small voice, that quiet, heavy voice. So maybe you're here today and you still have an uneasy mind, right? You're used to being told what to do, and the freedom to just empty yourself and follow is scary, right? There's a lot of people, right, that are stuck in a religion that's just about telling them what to do. That's a place of security. I hear that all the time from people who've left fundamentalism. They say, I felt so more secure and happy when I was a fundamentalist. I was like, no, you thought you were happy, but you were a slave. And there's security. There's security in that bondage, right? Every day you know what's going to be happening. It's going to be the same thing over and over again, right? I am terrible. The world's dying. Nobody likes anybody, right? I don't know. But, man, tough crowd this morning. But in that fundamentalism, you get shackled, and you're not really happy, right? So if you're still scared of freedom, that's okay. Freedom's scary. Choices are scary. Having to decide which things are good and bad for your life, that's not fun, right? When you're a kid, it's not fun because your parents pick for you. But then when you grow up, when you start having to picking, you realize none of it was fun for them, and it's especially not fun for them because they have to choose what's good for them and for you, right? Whether they listen or not. And it's okay to be in a place where you're scared. It's okay to be in a place where freedom frightens you. Maybe you're here this morning and you don't know how to pray, right? Where it is you need to connect, where it is you need to find God. You don't know what to pray or how to pray. And that's okay. If you don't know how to pray or you don't know where you're at spiritually, you don't have to be good at any of this, right? It's not magic. You don't say good words and then God does better things for you. There's no grading your prayers, right? If you need to learn how to connect to God more, you need to learn how to be more spiritual in the way that Jesus wants you to be more spiritual, then be like the tax collector, right? Who went up to the temple and could only beat his chest and just talk about you know what, God, I don't know what to do. I don't have it all going on. I can't figure any of this out. I feel terrible about my life and all the bad things that I've done. If you don't know how to be more spiritual, if you feel like you're lacking in this spiritual grandioseness that somehow exists for other people, just release those groanings of your heart, right? That deep down inside you voice, those insecurities, those doubts, that spiritual is the door locked, right? Release it. Let it out. Say to yourself, you know what? I'm just going to lay it all out here, God. It doesn't even have to be words. You can literally just groan. And I don't know what it is that'll make you more spiritual, but I know that is something that can get you to a place where God will show you that. And I don't have steps or guidelines to make you feel stronger in your faith. That's a path that we have to walk together. I can't give you any sort of prescription on how to get there, right? All I have to offer is what God offers. That uncomfortable, quiet space where we empty ourselves, where we cast aside our ego and we listen to the groanings of our hearts and keep our souls listening for God's groaning with us. The Apostle Paul puts it this way. Romans 8:26. In the same way the Spirit comes to help our weakness, we don't know what we should pray, but the Spirit himself, herself, pleads our case with unexpressed groans. If you have doubts, it's not a sign that you're broken. It's not a sign that your faith is messed up. It's not a sign that you don't believe. If you don't know how to be more spiritual, then you're probably closer to being the spiritual person you're supposed to be than you think, right? So this morning, we're going to go into communion in a second, but I want to urge us to have this time where we meet with God in the groanings of our own souls and our own hearts. And the deepness of that breath, right? That pneuma, that ruach, that thing that is you, and the deepness of that, your life force. Find the space that is beginning to be processed of this being filled with the Spirit, right? Release those groans and breathe back in the Spirit. If we do that, if we continue to be honest about who we are and we put our ego aside, right, and say, like, we are people that can doubt where we're at on this faith journey, who we are in this space. If we continue to be honest about that, then maybe it's us who's really the blessed. Maybe it's us that are the ones that are going to build this kingdom, right? Because what the world needs right now is not more people that can say, I've got all the answers, I've got all the problems solved, I've got everything going for me. What we need is real and honest people who are willing to walk with each other through life's tough journeys, right? We need more people who are going to be able to say, I don't have my crap together. And neither do you, and that's okay. It's easier to clean up a mess with 2 sets of hands than one, right? So let's begin this Lent as we go into the Easter celebration and everything. Let's begin to live into that status of who we are at Mission Gathering. Because, y'all, this is a church of real people. And I think sometimes we get caught up in feeling like we need to be more than who we are, or we need to be this special thing, or we got to be ready with all the answers. You don't owe anybody an answer, right? Except yourself. And you don't need to be better than anybody else, right? You just need to be you, authentically you. And that's what, when we say inclusion, your true self's included here, right? It may not fit on the list because I have no idea how to identify everybody, right? Which is an amazingly beautiful thing. But your true self is welcome here. Your true self is a part of this, and that's what we want you to bring. To empty yourself of whatever you think you're supposed to be. Just be you, right? Can we live into that freedom? Can we be so poor in our spirits that it's Christ that fills us and we're able to see the good and beautiful creation that we are? Amen.